I'm going to basically share with you a journey about, a bit about me, because I'm always talking about myself, and stop me if it's too much. But also I think when we reflect about ourselves, it's easier for us to reflect about other people as well. Because the first way to know about how other people feel is to think about how we would feel about things. So it's going to be a bit about that, so bear with me. So the title, when Roland actually found out that Noemi was trying to get me to KL, he was like so excited. He said, oh, let her talk about the Paris Agreement. I was like, oh no, Paris Agreement, boring, because it's all, you know, the global level. But it's interesting as well because it was a challenge for me, because the timing was so, everything happens for a reason in this world. The timing was so right, because just about a couple of weeks before that, I had just completed proposal on climate change. So this is going to be basically what I'm going to talk about as well in the presentation, how it is so relevant that people like me as well, who's always been skeptical in a way about everything that happens at top level, has to also consider this as part of the solution. So that's why I proposed the title, which is basically from Paris to Setiu, from basically Paris, where they agreed to do certain things, to Setiu, a small place in Terengganu where I spend a lot of time working with communities. And not just talking about Paris in a sense of what is Paris Agreement, but also to understand what does that mean to the people I work with, the real people, I would say. I'm not saying that other people are fakes, but, well, you know. So that's what the presentation is going to be. The outline is basically why Paris, why is it here, why are we discussing it today? So I'll be talking a bit about global climate change initiatives that has happened in the past 20 years. And then I will explain as well why am I connecting this to Setiu where I work. How is it to me a reality about climate change, and then also be a bit more optimistic about how we should move forward. So that's going to be the outline of the talk. So why Paris? Why not, right? It's beautiful. Everybody loves Paris. The most visited tourist destination in the world, although now Istanbul is also quite there, but well, still, people love the city of light. The question is why did we have to have the Paris Agreement? Is it because Kyoto got trumped? You know, so I'm going to try to give, because, you know, as academician, we cannot be too emotional. We have to be non-biased. We have to be, you know, empirical and everything. So I'm going to be a bit empirical about this as well. It's nice to always blame Trump for everything that happens in the world, but sometimes it's not fair on him. So that's why I'm going to explain as well, why did we have Paris if it's not because of Trump? So basically, it's very funny when climate change is not really something that belongs to our era. Climate change is actually an old understanding among scientists. Scientists have talked about this. This is a guy, Jean-Baptiste Joseph Fourier, he was actually a scientist during the Napoleon era. He was a mathematician, actually, and this guy was the one, basically, even though he did not coin the term greenhouse gases, but he was basically the one who understood. There was something wrong. He said, we cannot just say that whatever we emit that is what we have in the atmosphere. There's something else. There's another factor that is affecting us, and he called that the greenhouse gas. And it was through his paper, actually, in the 1820s, that actually talked about this. That's why when we talk about climate change, we talk about the greenhouse effect. Because one of his experiments was actually using that. He used a bottle, and they created a tool to demonstrate. And they use a glass bottle. That's why now, until today, we still use the same term when we talk about the effect of climate change and how to explain to people, to make people understand. So it was like, this is like 200 years. You know, the knowledge has been there. And of course, finally, so I'm not going to go around, you can do your own research, because nowadays, congratulations for not being on Facebook, because I think you're one of those people that resist, you know, a lot of people just give in. Well done, but I hope you still have access to internet, because there's so much that we can get, that to the extent that I think our generation, especially my students, I challenge them even in the first class to retain information. Because when in our time, I guess maybe a few younger people here, but most of the people I think in this room had to go to library every time we wanted to know something new, had to look up in a book. And because we human beings don't like to, we want to do other stuff than studying as well, so we force ourselves to remember so that we don't have to open the book every time. So we retain it in our head. But nowadays, you don't have to, because they want to know something, poof, but in 5 minutes, you ask them again, they don't know, because they know they can always look. But can you imagine if you don't have electricity? What will happen then, these people? So this is anyway but I know that you guys all have access to internet, so please look it up. But to make the very long story short, finally, by 1998, we decided to sit together and have this intergovernmental panel on climate change. Because by then, they have already proven that it is real. Our scientists have had all the charts, all the infographics to convince politicians that it is something that we have to basically handle together. And one good thing about this is that finally people decided that it's not a local issue anymore. Climate change is not like you burn in Setiu, you burn something in Setiu, it goes up and it affects you. No. Wherever you are in the world, the effect is going to be global. So this is one of the things that was able to convince scientists and politicians to sit together and say, yes, this is for the first time we have to sit together. That's why they started first with the Montreal Protocol, because finally we found this huge hole, and people couldn't believe it. It was a huge hole in the sky, and that got people together. So that was Montreal Protocol, and so then it was started off with the rest. Okay, so what is Kyoto Protocol, which basically is the first global initiative to basically tackle the problem of climate change? So Kyoto Protocol is very simple because they had this framework that worked so well. Montreal Protocol was so successful. Everybody jumped on it. Everybody wanted to hold hands and yes, let's help reduce the size of the ozone hole, right? So they used the same mechanism. They thought that, this would be something that we can do because it worked with Montreal, so let's do it again. So they sat together and it was they started talking about in 1992, and finally by 1997 they managed to get an agreement. Principle is the principle is simple. They said that everybody would have common but differentiated responsibilities, which means basically the people countries, developed nations would have different commitments compared to non-developed countries. In actual sense, non-developed nations are actually not committed to any emission reduction. But because the argument was that the developed nations were the ones who actually created most of the pollution load, so they have to be the one to lead. And help the developing countries basically do the same, but taking more green measures. That's why under this Kyoto Protocol, they had many mechanisms, including climate. They have the CDM, the clean development mechanisms, which even Malaysia was involved in, where basically, for example, we have a lot of palm oil, and palm oil emits a lot of methane. So what they do is developed countries, for example, Germany, they say they cannot cut down their emission, but what they do, they invest the amount that they can't cut on developments in Malaysia for palm oil industry to make sure that they can reduce the methane. So that's how so it's like the simpler way to call it is carbon credit, basically, or some people who don't like it say it's ticket for polluters to pay. Polluters can pay, so they can get away with it. So that's basically, I was going to click on that, but I think it's not necessary. Again, as I say, we are in the era of Internet of Things, so we could also find out if you want to. I'm not going to go on that. But I have, however, made an effort to simplify for you. The next slide will actually show you what is it about. So what happened was, 1997, people sat together in Tokyo and decided, yes, we're going to do this. But can you imagine, the first commitment only happened in 2005, because you know how complicated things are at global level. Everybody has to agree, have the minimum number of people. But finally they agreed. So the first commitment was in 2005 until 2012, where countries were given a certain amount of pollution load to reduce based on a certain baseline. So to be honest with you, actually, even before Trump, the US wasn't on board. The argument, one of the things they said is because, they didn't ratify. So they were party to it, but they did not ratify. So because they said, actually China is polluting just as much, or maybe a bit less than us, but they're considered still developing countries. So a lot of, I would call that, dragging their feet to commit. So they never committed. But for example, Canada did. Canada was on board for the first one. So a lot of other countries like Malaysia in blue, we did not have to commit to any reduction, but we benefited from some initiatives to help us improve the development path that we were doing in our country. However, after the first commitment, we have the second commitment period, and this is where things got a bit more, I guess, I don't know, maybe people just lose faith, or they, maybe, I don't know, something happened in the world that people just don't want to work together anymore. And so they tried in Doha to amend some things to make people still commit to this, but it didn't work. It's actually not even enforced, the highlighted area there, because not enough people actually committed to this. And this was also one of the biggest drawback, was the fact that Canada, even before the end of the commitment, decided to pull out. So it was a huge, hit on the face for people who actually been talking about this. So that's why basically people were just, what went wrong. And a lot, if you look at literature, if you do look up some references, you see a lot of so-called theories why this thing did not work out. But what I like about, I think, human is the fact that we still want to try to make things work. There's always something in us that we may have, for example, you have your best friend. You might fight, but in the end, you still want to be, because there's something there. So I think that's what happened after this. Even towards the end, when they knew that this was not going to happen, they still wanted to make it happen. So that's why we have Paris. So in Paris, what happened was they decided to still sit down and talk about it, but it's going to be different. They learn from their mistakes, and they say, probably this is what happened because we were being too patronizing to some people, maybe, and we have to recognize that maybe some people who were not involved want to be involved. So they had a new solution to this. We could also click on that, but I think you could also look it up. They have very good resource on UNFCCC's framework that can actually enlighten you more about what has happened there. But basically, the principles of Paris, which is a lot different, is that finally, the difference between the developed nation and the non-developed nations was not so distinct. Because, in the Kyoto Protocol, they had the one annex. All the Annex 1 countries had to commit to this. The non-annex country did not. So it's very clear. If you're developed, if you're non-developed, you belong to different clubs. But what happened in Paris is very interesting because they said, okay, fine. Maybe that was one of the biggest problems because we were too patronizing. We were basically building camps. So in Paris, what we should do, in Paris they decided, what we would do is we would ask people to volunteer. Instead of asking people to commit to a certain number, tell them what would be the best effort they can do. And not only ask developed nation, and not to the non-developed nation, but ask everybody. Everybody who thinks that this is important, so what can you do? So this is what they did. So every country, even small countries in the world, for example, Bhutan doesn't even have any emission, So but they say they want to do something. They want to do something, to contribute whatever they can. And it's amazing how, I guess, to some people that there is this solidarity as well. Every little helps. So that's one thing. It's basically make things a lot more democratic in a sense, that it became something that you're not being bullied to do. It's something that you commit to. And the second part is also, it's bottom-up, as I said. It's no longer somebody up there who's deciding, okay, this scientific data, we have numbers, calculations, and this is how much you have to emit, and you have to reduce. No, it's basically you, among local scientists, sit down, and taking into account your local context, because it's never the same. A country from our part of the world has a different, even culture and whatnot, that might be actually the impeding factor. You put that into your calculation, your own calculation, and you decide, okay, this is how much. This is what we think we can achieve, and propose that. So I think this is very, very interesting, because for once, I think went back to basics. Went back to trying to make friends again, trying to be human again, not trying to be machines. So that, I think that's very important. So now, well, of course, Trump doesn't want to get involved, of course, but still, it has gained more support than Kyoto Protocol. It has been because people, I think, suddenly are feeling that yes, this is voluntary. We do what we can. We commit to what we think we can, and yeah, despite being Trump, it's happening. For example, even in the US. They are having a lot of discussion about this. A lot of people in the US are not happy with the fact that they're not on board because this is voluntary. There's a lot of I think even companies in the US, even though there's no commitment from the US whatsoever, companies on their own are saying we want to do something. So it's amazing that even if your country is not on board, it's okay. You can, as individuals as well, can commit. So that's the special thing about it. So how does this connect to this place, this beautiful place where I work? You see at the back, that's part of the Banjaran Titiwangsa, the main range. You can see this is actually taking from behind this shot is actually the sea. And this is the lagoon, the Setiu lagoon, and then you can still see the mountain. It's not that far. And you go there, you find, some spots of pristine forest because it's heavily logged now, and you find rare orchids that some people have not even documented yet. So why are we talking about this from Paris, about Setiu now? So this is why. Setiu, I would like to introduce you to Setiu first. This is very interesting because Terengganu has this tagline. In tourism, they call it beautiful land, and the next one would be, they say, interesting culture. They call it negara cantik, budaya menarik, they call it. And Setiu embodies that. It has all these beautiful, if you go back, can you go back? I will just show you. It's basically, there's this species of terrapin, the painted terrapin, which is really, really peculiar. It's not a river terrapin, painted terrapin actually has to go to the sea to lay eggs. And it's the last place in Peninsular Malaysia where they actually do that, in Setiu. And the middle part is actually, this is an orchid that you find when you go to Setiu. This part it's not lush, it's not green. It is actually a bit like a savanna ecosystem. But when you go in, you find some days you can go in and you suddenly become shocked because the whole ground is pink with this flower. This is a wild orchid, a Dorotis, which is abundant there. And nobody takes notice. And then, of course, we have this Bekia. Bekia is a fragrant, is a family quite related to Melaleuca that people sell very much from Australia. And a lot of people from Kuala Lumpur go spend their weekends in this part of the world digging them out because it's very difficult to actually plant them in nursery. So they dig the whole tree, and it's a very popular bonsai. So they're digging away our heritage. We have this, I wanted to show as well. This is another typical forest of the coastland of Setiu. It's not like the forest you always see, very lush. This is a Glum Forest, a Melaleuca forest, where, if I can point to you, these are students who are doing their research, and you might not be able to see because it's very small, but you see the darker part here? During the monsoon season, it will be inundated. This is a plant that can survive when it's underwater, even when it's dry, and it even survives forest fire, bushfire. It will not die. It's called Melaleuca kajaputi or Lycodendron, and it's called Glum. And it's very interesting for me because I always like to know etymology of things. And when I asked why is it called Glum, and nobody can tell me, and I thought about it, it's because it's a tree that can submerge. I mean, it can survive when it's inundated. Glum is from tenggelam, submerge. So maybe that's why it's called that. And then, of course, you have beautiful vistas of the sea, and you can go cruise in the boat ride. So it's beautiful. And then, because of the beautiful landscape, the beautiful species that you have interesting culture. You have people, for example, this guy, I work a lot with him. He's a mud crab fisher. This lady, she collects the young shoot of nipa palms to make basically organic cigarette papers. I took a photo, a very old man. I think he's passed away now, who still had all his old trap for the mud crab that he put under his house. This is a product that is made from nipa as well. So this lady on top, she collects the young front, and we call it snapping, menjepat. It's amazing how they do it. They take the young leaves, and then what will be left is the rib, the lidi, the rib, and then this rib is not wasted. It's passed to another group to make those baskets. So we call that the 1001 tree, because every part of it can be used. And this lady in the middle is one who actually works. She makes mats, but she makes it from pandanus leaf, not like the one you see more in KL where it's broader, because it's made from the freshwater pandan. This is made from another pandanus species, which is actually coastal. It's more fine. And this finer lady, I love her. She harvests an aquatic plant, which is a Lepironia articulata. It is a grass, a species of grass, a mono species, and she weaves them as well into mats. So beautiful because of the abundance of biodiversity that they have there. So, but my connection to this place is because I did my PhD. My data for my PhD was here because I was actually researching about artificial reefs. And because I'm a people person, I didn't want to know how many fish actually congregate at the artificial reefs. I didn't want to know how many coral actually make their home on the coral reefs, artificial reefs. I wanted to know, does it work for the fishermen? I wanted to know what actually happens on the surface, not underwater. So I went researching there, and I picked up Setiu because it's so interesting. It is the most active artificial reef site. So I spent at least 2 solid years in the village working with them. So that's my connection to Setiu. And now it's even enhanced because I am made responsible, as you see my photo earlier, research station head, whatever. So I am leading a small research station in Setiu, where we've been there for almost 20 years now under Universiti Malaysia, Terengganu, where we work a lot on documenting what is in nature and what also is in culture. And our mission is basically to share knowledge, not only for publication, not only for teaching, but also for sharing, because we believe that, I at least believe that there's a lot that we can learn from the communities as well. So this is where I do a lot, because I don't believe in just being academic in that sense. I like, as I say, I'm a people person. So we do research, I do research, but I also do a lot of programs with children. We bring them in. This is a group of local children from the area. We take them birding, let them play with the strobes and everything, and discover the birds. We do, of course, our students go, and these are, I think you probably have seen, these are actually the prop roots of rhizophora. These are very old rhizophoras where students can even stand on them. And of course, we do a lot of CSR programs with Petronas and with industries, because we want people to appreciate this area and see the value of the area. So what do we know, having been there for almost 20 years? What do we know about Setiu Wetlands? We know there's a lot of species. We know there's a lot of species in Setiu Wetlands, and then we know because these species actually are there because there's actually 9 different ecosystems that can be found in Setiu Wetlands. So this ecosystem actually harbor the species. And because of that, we have diversified livelihood. So it's all interconnected. And that's why a couple of years ago, we came up with this publication just to celebrate. For me, it was a celebration of the things that we have learned about. And I think that's basically our slogan now. Whenever we talk about Setiu, we always talk about there's a lot of species, there's a lot of things, but because there's a lot of interesting ecosystems that are different from one another, and that's why we have such unique livelihoods, different people doing different things. And most importantly, we have to understand that here it is so obvious that people and nature are one. We are not separated. So in one diagram, I would say this is Setiu. You look at that little dragon there, it's actually a lake. Well, at least what it should be. This is an obsession of mine, because when I was doing my PhD, talking to the villagers, they told me about this lake. They told me that they used to go and picnic on weekends in this river called Sungai Ular, the Snake River. You see that a bit meandering, loopy river. That's Sungai Ular, the snake river. And I said, you must be kidding me. How can you swim in this river? It's like that deep. And they told me, no, Ja, when we were young, we can swim up to here. We used to go and wash our clothes and everything. I said, but it's impossible because, so I started to find out more. I said, how can it be like this? Oh, and they said, oh, because the plantation happened. So what happened was, before the 80s, that they used to have this called Tasik Berombak, which is, when you translate it, means the lake with waves. When you think about it, for a lake to have waves, it has to be huge. Because otherwise, it will just have ripples. But they call it Tasik Berombak, the lake with waves. So they told me it's big because last time they didn't have a coastal road. So the only way for them to be able to access the T3, one of the first roads in Peninsular Malaysia, was to basically take a small dugout from the coast, because they all live on the coast, the community I work with, and they would cross this huge lake to go hinterland, and that's where they can hop on the grid, transportation grid. And also because they are fisher folks, they would trade, they would bring dry fish and whatnot to trade with the hinterland people who had sweet potatoes, who had vegetables to trade with them. It's a barter trading. So they used to be, but what happened was, and as we know in Malaysia, land that has nothing is considered wasteland. So they wanted to do something in this area, I guess. And at that time, there was a very well-meaning Deputy Minister of Agriculture, which came from this area, who proposed that they do this huge plantation of cashew nut. So that's what they did. The state of Terengganu started a small company to plant all the areas surrounding this lake with cashew nut. Do we have cashew nut in Malaysia? We don't, because it doesn't work. I mean, Indonesia exports a lot, and even then, the cashew nut wasn't for people to eat. It wasn't that. They wanted the resin. They wanted, I do not understand, but there's something to do with guns. It's supposed to be something for ballistics or whatever. But the problem was they didn't have the factory there. The idea was to collect all the resin and send it all the way to Bangkok. So that's why the company went kaput. So when it went kaput, a very enterprising guy from Kuala Lumpur, I think he's from Kota Baru, heard about this, and he bought the whole stretch. For your information, around the lake, this plantation stretches about 26 kilometers long. And this guy, I think, bought over this enterprise for about 2 million ringgit only. And what did he do? He planted oil palm. And that is why any child you talk to from Setiu, anyone less than 20 years old doesn't know about this lake, because it is hidden behind this plantation. And it's so ironic for me, because palm oil on a Buris soil, because it's coastal, is actually sitting on top of ancient corals, this area, because 5 million years ago, the sea used to be further in. And then it's nutrient poor. I mean, some people from here, from Terengganu, they know it, but still they did it. So because of that, what they did for the plantation to survive, they started to irrigate. They started to channel water out from the lake. And now, that's why I just had a fight with the consultants of the Department of Irrigation and Drainage, because he told me, Jarina, your map is wrong. The lake is not that size. It's just a teeny weeny, it's like maybe 5% of that. I said, I refuse to accept that, because this is what it should be. And during monsoon season, it does get inundated. That is the actual lake. I want to keep it that way. Because then if you make it small, then that's all the target. They can just try to revive, to restore to that size. And I refuse to accept that, because basically what has happened is some of the lake has become land because of succession, because they drain it up, and slowly you see the hangguanas, the big floating lilies taking over. But if you are able to clear that away, you probably have still 50% of the lake. But anyway, so this Terengganu is very important for natural resource-based livelihood. It has diversified species, products, natural products, as well as, that's why they have different diversified livelihoods, because of the 9 different ecosystems. Okay, so, from our study, we find that the dependence is very high. Just taking an example, a snapshot of this village. This is one village, this is called Gong Batu. We sample for a day, this is just a snapshot. A day we managed to survey, there's actually about 154 houses in the village, but my students were able to go in, as part of their small project, to go in into 6 villages, and the ones who actually went to this village managed to survey 37 houses. And out of 37 houses, 21 household claimed to be dependent on one or the other resource in Setiu wetlands. So very high dependence. And they depend on flora as well as fauna species. That means the one that you see on top is actually dried young nipa leaves that is going to be used for people who, in Malaysia we roll the cigarette, the tobacco in palm leaves. So this is what their product. And various others, they make thatch, they make pandan mats, this is charcoal, they also have, this is a vinegar, local vinegar, and also that photo is very important. It is Paneus monodon, a tiger prawn. That bought me my thesis. Because my external reviewer, when he saw my thesis, got so excited. Seeing this tiger prawn, the size is 32 cm. 32 cm. And I only had a 15 cm ruler with me when I sampled this. So he happened to be, when he was doing his PhD, he was doing his PhD on monodon in Mexico. So he's like, and what happened was, the next summer he was in Setiu. So I managed to bring this guy from Scotland all the way. For the first time, he's never been to Asia. He's always worked in South America. Suddenly he saw this and wanted to come to our part of the world. And the first thing he said when he arrived in Malaysia was hola. Because he's so used to going field and we look, basically South American, I guess. He said hola. He said, oh my God, I just realized I'm not in South America. But anyway, so it does draw people. And then that one is actually a young juvenile groupers that is also harvested in the estuary, because that's where they come and spawn. We have a lot of variety of cockles as well as the famous mud crab. That's the resources. We have also other stuff. So many, for example, they have agriculture. And that guy, I caught him when I was doing my sampling. I was so curious, what was he doing? He had a boat full of this stuff. He was catching small fish, damsel fish, and he said that he can sell each individual for 50 cents at that time. He had loads, and I was wondering, this is basically what we call illegal, unregulated fishery, because nobody actually is taking account and who's taking note on the productivity and the harvesting, right? But this happens every day. They have freshwater lobster as well. They have other stuff. So a lot is happening there. And what comes out from having used the natural resource over time, this community has been there for a long time, is a very important asset, which is traditional ecological knowledge. They understand the place so well. They know so much that we scientists know very little of. So this is very, very important asset that we want to basically highlight. And that's why for the longest time, at least for me personally, since 2013, I've started to aggressively lobby for the gazettement of this area, and I was able to present to the Sultan of Terengganu about this concept. Because people were, for the longest time, actually Terengganu has always been the buzzword. Even UMT has started trying to lobby for this since 2003, I think. But it never took off because there was past at that time, they didn't have resources, and then when they came back, there was a bit more opening, and then it got a lot of politics going on. But 2013 was a good time. 2012, 2011 was a good time because we learned that Tuanku started to come to Setiu. The king started to come, and we had a window. And one day we were called to the palace and to present. So this was what we presented, because we knew even in 2008, the ECER had come up with a plan for the East Coast. And one of the plan was to actually create a state park in Terengganu. But the approach was a typical state park where you take people out. It's basically like Taman Negara, but it doesn't work because people live there. There's actually people living there. So and at the same time, the state wasn't refused because they say we don't want to stop development. So when we went to present to the king, we said that we are for development, we are for livelihood, but we are also for whatever is supporting it. So we wanted to say, let's conserve, protect whatever is sustaining this ecosystem, because by doing that, we'll be able to improve community well-being by introducing sustainable livelihood. And we wanted to have the state to have its own state park. And alhamdulillah, I think we touched wood, we managed to do that. End of last year, they passed the bill, and as of this year, we have a state park in Setiu Wetland as well as in Kenyir. So, good. But, so, the thing now come back to, because that's now you know Setiu very well, I hope you want to go there. Let me know, contact me. But what does it mean to people, my fisherman friends in Setiu? What does it mean? So the person who started to talk to me about this is my colleague, Po Sengchi. Okay, Po came to me and started talking about a proposal that he was doing for the Coral Triangle Initiative. He wanted to do a proposal to send to them because, can you click the next one? Because he is a climate change, ocean acidification researcher. So he wanted to propose a project that actually understands, climate change among small-scale fishermen. Okay, I'm going to tell you his story. So to whom? Okay, climate change is like this is the problem. Okay, we know that when the polar ice start to melt, the first people affected will be the coastal people. Because we have papers as well. That shows it, discuss it, this is what's going to happen. It's going to impact the coastal regions. And then, that this paper in Nature also shows, actually they have data to show that this will be the most vulnerable areas in the world when this happens, including us. Okay, we are there. And then so another thing is that we have to remember as well that coastal productivity is going to be affected. And people depend on this coastal productivity. So it's a very, very serious problem. For example, this paper has done to show how climate change is actually changing how marine ecosystem, productivity and whatnot. And for example, it explains that it's very interesting just now. I had a question from the young people this afternoon because they were trying to understand climate change. So I threw the question back to them, what do you think caused climate change? So one of them said, deforestation. So we discussed, so why is deforestation a problem? Or I said, because it creates unbalance. I said, why does it create unbalance? So in the end, we managed to say, because the only thing, plants are the most amazing things in the world because they are the only ones that can produce oxygen, plants. But at the same time, they also are the only things that actually suck in carbon dioxide. So if you take away the plants, then who's going to suck in all the carbon dioxide that we're producing? That's the imbalance. But people always forget that the sea is also a carbon sink. People always forget that. So this is what is happening as well. There's so much stress in the sea that the sea is abilities to absorb carbon is compromised and is doing very really nasty things to organisms. For example, it actually impacting the way that the life cycle of the marine organism, which is being affected at different levels of life. And so, especially for him, especially fishery, Jarina, people who actually depend on cockles and whatnot are going to be impacted. So how does it? So people already documented how this is impacting the industry, and then so what does it mean actually? For example, this is good because some people don't understand why because this ocean is becoming more acidic as they have more carbon sinking into it. And this is a very good, actually a magazine, Earth magazine online that shows a very simple experiment. This is a specimen. I will show you two organisms. The same organism, two specimens. This is one that is put under a normal level of carbon dioxide, and you see, it's okay. But his friend is actually being put in a different environment where it is actually a more carbon dioxide induced environment, and it has basically lost most of its spine because it actually has an effect on the way that they actually build their calciferous, their body. So that's why he said, Jarina, that's why we have to do this research on how it's impacting. So whatever we're doing there is affecting the bivalves, especially the mollusks and crustaceans. So as the one showed just now, for example, they are having problem to, how, it's very funny. I don't know if you like soft shell crab, but I implore you, please don't eat soft shell crab. It's so sad. Because you take them, because a lot of people force them to molt. so that you can have, because human beings are so lazy, we don't want to work, we don't want to take out the shell, we just want to, so what do? We cut off their hands so that they get stressed and they try to molt again. But okay, that's the thing that they do industrially. But even as we speak, even if we don't do that, they're facing so much other problem. They can't even make their shells anymore because of they are basically trying to fight. Every day they fight against the carbonites that is trying to steal their carbons. It's a battle to survive. So next time you see a shellfish, look at it differently. It's having a lot of problems nowadays. But still, for me, what does it mean? I mean, some people call us, people like me, they don't even call us scientists. They call us pseudo-scientists. I mean, Jarina, you don't do science. You spend time hanging out with people. You spend time talking to, you do all this soft stuff. So why should this actually mean anything to me? Because I am a person who's not concerned about the numbers, how many, the different, it's not my stuff. So why should I work with you? I asked how could I work with you? So, because the problem was for him, if he wanted the grant, he was told, we don't want your proposal. We want a proposal that speaks about how people how is climate change affecting people's lives. So that's why he had to come to me. So he had to sit down and I had to talk to him about what I do. Because for me, next slide, is what climate change means to my fishermen friends would be very different. I want to know, how do they describe climate change? How is it felt in their everyday lives? How do we learn from that? Because we always think, scientists all like to think that they know everything because they have got the data and everything, but they don't go to sea every day. They don't go harvesting, gleaning every day. These people do. They have better data than we do. But only they don't speak the same language. They don't talk about ocean acidification. They might have terms of their own. So that's what I want to know. I want to know what is their knowledge about ocean acidification. I want them to tell me how does the biology of a clam is impacted. When they go, did you see that they have terms to describe. And then about their concepts as well. How does it work? In their world, how does the clam actually make its shell? How does it actually spawn? Things like that. And most important thing is, how do they feel this things that is happening around them is impacting the way they live? Where does climate change have a place in their lives? What role does it have in their lives? And most importantly, what are their hopes? Because people have to have hope. Otherwise, they just sit down and, pray that they will die. But these people are resilient. People I work with are resilient. They always have hope. But they also have expectations. So I want to know this. These will be the questions that are relevant to me when I talk about climate change and people, my coastal fishermen, not what Poe is trying to. But there's relevance to what he's trying to do as well. So we have to always remember as well, but that for example, in Setiu, the small-scale fishery is so diversified. People always forget that. For example, my contention in my PhD was that they deployed artificial reefs everywhere, not taking into account who does what kind of fishery. Because we have to remember, a guy who uses a net will never use artificial reefs because he doesn't want his net to get caught. Only the line fishers would go there. And the people who actually use the cage, you might not want them to be there too often because then they will trap all the big fish, the demersal fish, which you want to be able to spawn. So you have to understand this. But Malaysia has always been, unfortunately, has been so, you think that there's one solution for all. There is no such thing. So you have to be able to take this into account. And of course, my famous prawn that only comes to Setiu during monsoon. So monsoon is coming soon. Think about it. 32 cm. Okay. And how do we do this? How do we move forward? My lesson is from all these wonderful people. Some of them are no longer with us, who helped me during my PhD. This is what they do. They sit down. People think you see them on Fridays in late afternoon. They just sit down and chat. They say, these people are lazy. They do nothing. They just sit there and talk. But if you sit there and pay attention, you realize they are not just talking. They are exchanging information. They're asking you, so where did you go yesterday? How was, they're engaging, trying to find, understand. They share, oh, I did this, and this is the tool I use. This is a hub, information hub, this wakaf. We call it wakaf. This is so important. So learn from them. For that lesson for me is that I have to always learn from each other. Me, pseudoscientist, and my friend Po, the real scientist, have to start and think of a merger. He has to start to understand how I work, and I have to start understanding how he works, understand his concepts, his concern, and vice versa. And then when we are already understanding each other, we go and talk to them. These people we can learn so much from. This is how we should do it, in my opinion. And then, of course, the most important thing is to be able to also address. I think this goes back to that movie we saw earlier. We have to think about what would be the best way to engage people on climate change. How do we communicate? I think there's a lot of things that we can communicate by learning from them. Perhaps we can throw terms, things that people never thought that fishermen knew, that we could use as a teaser, as a bait, to take people, see, this is real, this is happening. So how do we actually use the knowledge that we gain from each other, and then so that we can commit people, hold people to this climate change agenda. And of course, my inspiration has been, when I was doing my PhD, started doing my PhD around 2007, there was this group that were working, they were all, because of climate change, they all were working in the Antarctica and Arctic. And this group, I was very lucky because I came across this group of people led by Burkers, Professor Burkers, who were not just, because there are a lot of climate scientists all over the pole, but his team was more about trying to understand what people who live there every day, the Inuits, the Eskimos, what do they know about it? And it's a revelation even to scientists, because after that, for example, he was able to show, and he managed to bring a linguist as well, to show that how can you say that you know climate change and these people don't, when they have 120 words just to describe sea ice. If somebody can talk about sea ice in 222 words, in two terms, they definitely know sea ice better than you do. So stop the nonsense. Listen. Ask them. So this was an inspiration for me, that actually people in the field know who live, this is their life, this is everyday life, they know so much more than we so-called scientists or pseudo-scientists do. So this is my inspiration. And my hope is that with our improved understanding on the traditional ecological knowledge on ocean acidification, we'll be able to appreciate the realities of climate change, blah, 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 towards having the most suitable support for the climate change adaptation strategies. Wishes luck, and thank you for your kind attention.